What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Setless Strength podcast. I'm back from Las Vegas, coming fresh off the wave of the Craig Jones Invitational 2. Day 2 was absolutely nuts. If you saw my last podcast episode, that was in Vegas right after day 1. And day 2, it was crazy. So right after we had recorded that recap of day 1, I went on Instagram and then I saw Craig Jones post about the $50,000 bonus if you get a submission on day 2, which was freaking awesome. It was so crazy to see, like, okay, like they're putting up like big money, and they're putting up like a huge incentive for people to drive more action, for people to not be as gun shy, so to speak. And so that really did help kind of generate like some extra hype behind day 2. And so going into day 2, we had Team Atos still in, New Wave was in, B Team was in, and then the Australasia Misfits. Those were the 4 teams. And looking at those 4 teams, I mean no disrespect to any of the teams, on one side of the bracket, it seemed pretty clear, like, yeah, B Team pretty much has their semifinal in the bag. I'd be really hard-pressed to see B Team lose to Australasia. And it pretty much played out like how I expected, you know? But then the one that I was kind of questioning was Atos versus New Wave, and that was actually a pretty good duel. There was a ton of excitement behind it. I think the first match was Kynan Duarte and Wagner Hosha. So for Wagner, who's pretty old, to not get submitted by Kynan and for it to result in a draw was super exciting. Mika versus Hulk. Did I see that one? I can't remember. Either way, it was in a, it seemed like they just stalled each other out. I didn't see much of that match because I think I was getting to the venue a little bit later. But the match that was pretty exciting was, who was it? Luke Griffith and Diego Pato. Diego Pato is incredible. I love watching him compete. He's super funny. He has some real nasty leg locks, and so I was kind of hoping, like, okay, maybe Diego Pato could pull something off against Luke Griffith, but Luke Griffith was super strong, pretty big, really technical, and so he ended up finishing with a submission. But then when they brought out Felipe Pena, that actually got me pretty excited because last year, Felipe Pena and Luke Griffith were in the finals of ADCC, and that was a pretty good match. Luke had a really awesome takedown on Felipe Pena. I can't remember how Felipe Pena won. He might have submitted him, but Felipe Pena and Luke had a really close match in the finals of ADCC 1 year ago. So to see them get a rematch at CJI was pretty fun. And Luke was coming off the momentum of getting a big submission over Diego Pato. And the match, I would say, was there was some good back and forth and some good exchanges. The crowd was into it. The crowd was hype. And then Felipe Pena put on a nasty armbar on Luke Griffith, where even though, like, it's $4 million, if your team wins, if you get submitted and you hold out for the last second, you get injured, and your team wins that match, you still got to compete later on. So it was definitely interesting to see, okay, is Luke Griffith going to just let his arm get busted up, or is he going to end up tapping? And he did, and so Felipe Pena took that match via submission. And then this was probably like the craziest David versus Goliath match I've ever seen, probably since Gary Tonin versus Paul Harris back in like 2015 or 2016. Felipe Pena beats Luke Griffith on New Wave, and the New Wave sends out Dorian Oliveras. This was so insane to see. Dorian pretty much ran a clinic on Felipe Pena, and guard passing, he like bullied him the entire time, which was nuts. Felipe Pena has a really, really tough guard, so for Dorian Oliveras to be the minus 66 kilogram athlete on Team New Wave and go up against Atos's 99 plus 99 athlete, that's insane. Like that's freaking crazy. And Dorian passed his guard, he mounted him, he took him down. Like, it was so insane. I don't think he really came close to any submissions, but that was really, really exciting. Because there was no submission, that match ended up going to a draw. So then it came down to the submissions were 1-1. I think on the judges' scorecards, New Wave was up just by a little bit. because in the match with Mika and Hulk, Hulk ended up getting a penalty. So it really did come down to the last match, Giancarlo Bodoni versus Hinaldo Jr. And that match was pretty good. Giancarlo had some great exchanges, some great armbar attempts, and then he was able to finish that match with an armbar, which got everybody fired up and excited. We had seen three submissions in that first matchup of day 2, New Wave versus Atos, and that was super fun. I was feeling super excited. The next match was B Team versus Australasia, the last semifinal match. And I kind of mentioned it earlier, but it pretty much went how we expected it to. B Team had a really dominant performance over Australasia. First match was, Chris Wojcik versus Lucas Canard. I was pretty excited for that match because both guys have great leg locks, but they did kind of cancel each other out a little bit, and it resulted in a double elimination. And then we saw Kenta Iwamoto versus Nicky Rod. That was going to be interesting because Kenta has some great takedowns, and in the Australasia trials that Lachlan Giles put on, Kenta had some pretty awesome takedowns against some big guys. And Kenta's trained with Nicky Rod before at B Team back in the day. So that was an interesting match. Nicky Rod dominated pretty much the entire match. That ended in a draw. So then it came to Fabricio Andre and Victor Hugo. Or no, it was Ethan Carlston versus Declan Moody. That was pretty crazy too, because you got one of your bigger guys going against one of the smaller guys. Ethan survived, which was really cool. And so that resulted in a double elimination. But then I was really excited for this match, and I was kind of hoping it would be a little bit more exciting, but that was Fabricio Andre versus Victor Hugo. At ADCC in 2022, I believe they faced each other in the first round of the absolute bracket. And I don't think Victor Hugo submitted him. I could be wrong. My memory, I may be mixing matches up, but I don't think Victor Hugo submitted him. But at CJI on day 2, Victor Hugo did get a submission. And then Victor Hugo stays in, and then he competes against, who was it? I got the name here. Oh, Bilal Itiabari. So Bilal Itiabari had like a pretty nasty straight ankle lock on Gio Martinez, and that created some controversy because Gio said he didn't tap. It looked like a tap to me. And so he stayed in against Kyle Baim, and then he got in a leg lock shootout with Kyle Baim, and Kyle Baim just ripped a nasty heel hook on him. And it looked like he got injured in that match. And then sure enough, when Bilal walked out against Victor Hugo, the announcer said something along the lines of like, he's been injured, but he's still going to compete. And it was like, I don't know, they kind of put him on blast like that, which was kind of, I don't know. If I were the athlete, even if I was injured, I'd be thinking like, hey man, like don't put me on blast, you know, like don't let anybody know I'm injured. I might not be able to do much, but definitely don't say I'm injured. So that was interesting. And then Victor Hugo ended up getting another submission on Bilal. So Victor Hugo made a ton of money over the weekend, which was great to see. So then those were the semifinals. And then we moved into the finals of the women's bracket, which honestly was probably the most exciting part of the tournament, seeing Sarah Galvao's match against Ana Carolina Vieira. That match was super exciting and super fun. And so then to kind of carry that hype into day 2 with Helena Cravar versus Sarah Galvao, that match was super exciting. I think the first round, Sarah was pretty dominant, and in the second round, Helena started to come back a little bit more. So going into the third round, you could pretty much see like, okay, they each have one round. It really comes down to like an incredibly dominant performance by either one of them, or one of them's got to finish it with a submission. And that's what ended up happening. Helena Cravar got a really tight straight ankle lock, or it might have been kind of like an Aoki lock, but that was exciting. And so to see the winner of the women's bracket, Helena Cravar, get $100,000 is freaking insane. It's so crazy. It's nuts to see like as you get older as an adult. Well, let me put it this way. When you're a kid, you don't really have like a good understanding of how much money like is really worth, you know? Like I remember when I was a kid, I think I was 12 years old, or maybe I was 11, and then my friend turned 12. But I remember my friend was, he turned 11 or he turned 12, and his parents gave him a $100 bill. And I thought that was crazy. I was like, that's crazy work right there to get $100 on your birthday. And I kept thinking like, man, you could buy so many Legos with that. But then you become an adult, and regardless of inflation, you're like, yeah, $100 is like, that ain't going very far. So as an adult, as you start to recognize more and more like how far money can go and how sometimes short money can go, like $100 doesn't get spread that far when you're an adult compared to when you're a kid. But regardless of where you are, for any athlete to win $100,000 for 2 matches, that's crazy. That is so awesome. It's really a great sign that like the sport is growing. It's a great sign that there's investment in the sport. And I think the women's bracket was definitely worth $100,000. It's not like all the matches were boring and then they resulted in some like judge's decision that was super lame. It really was an incredibly exciting bracket, and it was awesome to see Elena Kravar win 100 Gs, basically for being the best female grappler on the planet, which is awesome. So that happened. We were all, like me and Andrew and Zach, we were super excited, super hype. And this is where, I don't want to say like things kind of fell off. Like I don't want to be a hater in any sense, and I don't want to be someone that is like being unfair and providing unfair criticism to CJI too. But just to be honest, from my own experience and my own perspective, things really peaked with the Sarah versus Helena match. That was incredible. Like everybody was hyped. Then after that, we have Chael Sonnen versus Craig Jones, which I was pretty bummed out to hear that Gable Steveson pulled out of the match under some conspicuous circumstances, I would say. And even though Chael Sonnen's an OG, he's a legend, it's just not as exciting as like Gable Steveson versus Craig Jones. And that match is like not even 10% as exciting when you think of how crazy it was that Craig Jones was going to fight Gabby Garcia at CJI 1. So not that it was a killjoy or anything, but it was just like we've already seen this match play out before. Craig Jones submitted him 8 years ago at ADCC 2017, so it's not like I wasn't expecting to see anything crazy. And so I would say like I wasn't expecting to see anything crazy, but I was severely mistaken because we did see some pretty crazy stuff. So when Craig Jones walked out, he got on the mic and he said some stuff like his, I said Craig Jones, sorry. When Chael Sonnen walked out, he got on the mic, did his Chael Sonnen bit and all that stuff. And then Craig Jones walked out with the rapper Riff Raff, which I listened to Riff Raff in high school mainly as a joke because that guy is so wild and just so out there. It's like, it's so hard to take him seriously, but it's like, Riff Raff I feel like is music you listen to kind of as a goof. Like there are definitely rappers out there that are goofy, that have like, sometimes you're not sure if they're like, this is part of the act or if they really take themselves that seriously. But Riff Raff is one of those guys where it's like, you only listen to his songs because they're hilarious. And so Riff Raff comes out and he does a song, and then Craig Jones comes out. And so then the match with Craig and Chael starts, and within like 15 seconds, Chael gets a pretty quick takedown, lands in side control, and then Craig Jones immediately throws up a buggy choke, and Chael goes to sleep, which is crazy. And at first, I legit thought it was staged, and I thought it was fake originally. I was like, what is happening? Like, are we moving into some like WWE territory where in the back they're like, all right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do a real big takedown, throw you to the floor, and then you just make me pass out as fast as possible. I don't know if that's what happened. I don't think that's what happened. But from where I was sitting in the stands, it definitely looked staged. So then Chael gets up and he starts doing this. He starts like throwing up the number 2 and then throwing up the number 3. And basically saying like, all right, best 2 out of 3, best 2 out of 3. And so then they start the match again. They just restart and Big John McCarthy says like, all right, go. and Craig Jones hits him with another buggy choke in like 30 seconds. And Chael passes out again. It was insane. And I've heard this before. I don't know how true this is, but I heard that similar to how like you only have so many brutal knockouts that you can take before you just start having a glass chin, where just the slightest touch, you get knocked out and you get concussed. I've heard that a similar thing can happen with how many times you go out in jiu-jitsu, where if you get put to sleep in jiu-jitsu, you can only do that so many times before your tolerance of pressure and lack of oxygen to your brain, that tolerance starts to degrade over time. And I've only ever been put to sleep, I think twice. I'm trying to think. There was one time I remember I was a kid, I think I was in high school, and I was doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu, and I got put in a head and arm choke, and I was doing the answer the phone defense, and I was like, this guy's not putting me out, I'm doing answering the, and I went out. And I remember waking up, and the coach was over me, he's like, patting my chest, is like, hey man, you good? And I woke up, and I was like, what is going on? Like, that just felt like the most amazing nap ever. And so I was probably like 14 or 15 when that happened. And then the last time I got put to sleep, I knew I was about to go to sleep because I got caught in a Von Flu choke and my hands were stuck. So I couldn't tap in time. And I went to sleep and that was it. And I think I was probably like 22 or 23 when that happened. And so, at least for me, I've tried to make sure that I don't ever get put to sleep. I don't think that's ever a good idea. And I don't know if Chael's been put to sleep so many times that his tolerance for that kind of pressure and lack of oxygen to his brain means he just goes to sleep super fast. I don't know if it was staged. Initially in the moment, I thought it was staged, but then after kind of like rewatching the videos and rewatching some close-ups, I was like, well, that doesn't look staged. It looked like he really got put to sleep for real. So regardless, that was just kind of a weird match, and it was fun, I would say, but it definitely didn't capture the same like craziness and insane hype behind CJI 1, where the super fight was Craig Jones versus Gabby Garcia. Like it just didn't meet that same high, if you will. But once that happened, then we move into the final between Team New Wave and B Team. And I know that most of you guys listening to this have been probably waiting for me to talk about what the heck happened. And I'll say this, when I was before the first match started between Mika Galvao and Chris Wojcik, at least I think that was, Mika versus Chris was matchup number 1. I was so hyped. I was thinking if B Team has a really strong chance based on the lineup that they could take out Team New Wave. New Wave has a bunch of killers on there, so they also have a really strong chance that they could beat B Team. And depending on how everything lined up, it could go either way. So I was super excited. And the match between Mika and Chris, that seemed like something where, okay, like if Chris Wojcik has got some real nasty leg locks, and Mika, the last few times he's been submitted, have been via leg locks. So if there's anyone that has a really strong chance to take out Mika, it was going to be Chris. And Chris did an awesome job. His guard retention was great. He did get a couple slick entries into the legs and things like that. But that match ended in a draw, so no submission. The way the tournament was working was if there's no submission, then it's a draw. If all 5 matches go to a draw, then they score each individual match based on points. And so all of us were kind of keeping that in mind in the back of our heads. So me and Zach were sitting next to each other, and we watched the Mika Chris match, and we're like, okay, there was no submission, but Mika pretty much was pushing the pace on that one for the most part. That if it goes to judge's decision, Mika took that match. The next match was Dorian Oliveras and Ethan Krelenston, and Dorian really, really dominated a large percentage of that match, but he didn't really have any submission attempts. Or not that he didn't have any submission attempts. There weren't any strong submission attempts that required a really aggressive escape from Ethan. There was one instance, though, where Ethan got the close guard and was like, he went for like, I think they call it like or an underhook or like an uppercut sweep or an underhook sweep or something. Basically, you're in close guard, and when they stand up, you punch up, you get like an underhook under their foot, you punch up with your arm as hard as you can, and you drive your hips into their chest, and you can get a sweep and come up on top. And so it looked like Ethan was going for that type of technique, and then he somehow got a hold of Dorian's leg that just got cranked and torqued in this crazy position. It wasn't like a leg lock position, it was just like a weird scramble position where Dorian's leg got caught up. And so that seemed like the most threatening thing that happened in the match, even though it wasn't like, I guess like an obvious submission attempt. It's not like he had a fully locked in heel hook or was in like, inside Senkaku or 411 and like had like a strong grip on the leg or anything. But it just looked like, oh dang, like that could have, messed up Dorian's knee. I don't know if it did or not, but it looked like it could have. And so then that kind of brings us to the next match, which was, or actually, I think I skipped one. So first match was Mika and Chris. The next match, I think, was Wagner and Victor Hugo. In that match, Victor like dominated the entire time. It was a total one-sided match. He didn't get the submission, but again, if you looked at the scorecards, it's very clear that Victor won that match. Then you go to the match with Dorian and Ethan. Even though Ethan kind of had that weird leg twist position, Dorian really did still kind of dominate a huge chunk of that match. So then we go into number 4, which was Giancarlo Bodoni versus Joseph Chen, which that was a great match. That was really technical. There was some great guard retention from Joseph. Neither one could get a submission, and what was really impressive was for Joseph to not get submitted by the 2-time ADCC champ Giancarlo Bodoni. That was really impressive. Even though he didn't get submitted, Giancarlo still controlled a lot of that match, and based on the judges' scorecards, it'd be pretty clear that, okay, yeah, Giancarlo won that one. So there's no submissions yet, and it goes into the very last match, and it was insane. You could feel the energy, you could feel the hype, like everyone was kind of on bated breath thinking like, okay, what's going to happen? And if you keep up with the jiu-jitsu and you watch all the events and the matches and all that stuff, you'll know that Luke Griffith and Nicky Rod competed, I think 3 years ago at EBI 20 or EBI 25 or something like that. They competed at EBI, and Nicky Rod ended up submitting Luke Griffith. So Nicky Rod was the favorite coming into this match. Once the match started, there were some good stand-up exchanges, and then Nicky Rod ended up getting a takedown, getting a body lock, passing to side control, and then dominated the rest of the match. He had one really strong submission attempt, which you could look at that as like he dominated positionally. He had a really strong submission attempt, but wasn't able to get the finish. And so you could look at that as not only did Nicky Rod win that match, but because of the 10-point must system, you could look at that as like, man, that might even be like a 10-8 round. So what I was thinking when all of this was going on with B Team versus New Wave, I saw Nicky Rod miss the submission, and as soon as that happened, I looked at Zach and I was like, I think New Wave just won. Like, I don't think that B Team's gonna get it. So the match ends, it goes to a draw. So this is where the controversy really started. If there are 5 eliminations or there's a tie on submissions, what my understanding of the rules were going into this event was if that happens, then they look at which number of matches did the teams win based on judges' scorecards. So for example, if there's 5 matches and 2 teams, that means, if one team wins 4 matches based on judges' decision and then the other team only wins 1, well, the team that won 4 matches via judges' decision, they would be the winners of that duel. And so what was crazy was they go to the judges' scorecards for they go to the judges' scorecards since there's no submissions. And then the judge, or not the judge, but the announcer, he said that the judges score the contest 47-47. All three judges score it 47-47, which is crazy. And the only way that that could happen is, basically, like, you had some matches that were 10-8, and you had some matches that were 10-9. So, to my understanding, and hopefully my math is correct, which it usually is not, but it seemed like they scored the matches between Mika and Chris, Dorian and Ethan, and Giancarlo and Joseph Chen. New Wave won all of those. You can just watch the matches on YouTube or Flow Grappling. You can just see like, oh yeah, those New Wave definitely won those matches. But to my understanding, I think they scored those 10-9 in favor of New Wave. And then you had the Victor Hugo match against Wagner Hocha. Then you had the Nicky Rod match against Luke Griffith. And to my understanding, they scored those matches 10-8. So I'm not exactly sure how all that works out and all of that. But basically, the end score between the two teams is 47-47. So then they go to the next criteria, which is where it gets confusing. In the rule book, it says if the score is tied, then the next criteria is the winner of the last match wins it for the team, which means that Nicky Rod won the last match via judge's decision, so then B team wins. And when they announced B team as the winner, it was very, very strange. Like, you could feel the tension in the arena. Like, everyone was super confused. Like, there's like when people like win, or like when the crowd is really invested in something, like there's like sometimes like this collective like vibe or frequency that everybody's on, where like the whole crowd, regardless of who you're a fan of or who you're not a fan of, when something crazy happens, there's like this pop where everyone in the crowd just goes nuts. And that happened last year at CJI 1. It was so exciting. And at the very end of the match between Cade Rutolo and Andrew Tackett, the whole crowd was on their feet, just going nuts, yelling, one more round, one more round. Everybody was hyped. But then you have these moments where there's confusion, and it's not like that at all. And so when they announced that B team were the winners, everyone was like, what? Like, that? Huh? Okay, that doesn't, we didn't expect that. And then you could even see it on a lot of the faces of the people down there in the pit. So like the New Wave guys were kind of looking at each other like, what is happening? The B team guys, for a second, it seemed like we're looking at each other like, what? Like, did we really just win? And so that was kind of like the big controversy. And then sure enough, in the days following, it's just continued to explode. And so it gets weird with the rules, where when you look at the criteria of what it says happens if there's 5 draws or if there are 5 matches that don't end in submission. So no team got a submission. If that happens, there's one bullet point in the rule book that says then the winner is determined on which team won the most matches via judge's decision. And then there's a bullet point under that says if the team score is tied, then the winner is determined by who won the last match. And so it gets confusing, because it's, on one hand, I can totally see how some of the guys from New Wave and the people that really wanted New Wave to win, I could see how they look at the rules and say like, man, New Wave totally got robbed. New Wave won 3 matches via judges' decisions or won 3 matches against B team's 2 matches. You look at that and it's like, yeah, it's clear as day. New Wave should have won. But then you look at the bullet point in the rule book, and it says if the total team score is tied, then you go to who won the last match. And it almost seems like the rule book needed to be more clear about which one goes first. Like, you go first is when you go based off of who won the more matches or the most matches via judge's decision. Then if there is a tie between that, so like say there's a across 5 matches, like there's a tie because of penalties or whatever, then you go to who won the last match. And so it was really confusing. It was honestly kind of like disheartening to see the event end that way. And in the days following, I think it was on Monday, that's when Craig Jones posted that New Wave is, the athletes from New Wave are also going to get awarded $1 million, which I think was super cool. And I saw something on Reddit where the secret investor of CJI2 was the one that decided to give the extra $1 million to the athletes at New Wave. And you would think that that would be good enough, right? Like you would think that the jiu-jitsu community would appreciate that and respect that and be like, you know what, like this is how we make the best out of an unfortunate situation. But I see so many people hating on CJI2, and it makes me so mad because I think people forget like how boring jiu-jitsu was to watch just a few years ago. Like I started jiu-jitsu in 2017, and it like when I started before ADCC 2017, and I'd say like when I started, I was getting into EBI and like watching those matches. Those were super exciting, but those were kind of the anomaly. Most of the jiu-jitsu events weren't that exciting. And then ADCC 2017 happens. We start to see more and more EBIs, which were super fun to watch. You start seeing like better super fights. Who's number one starts coming up, and just it was the tide that started to raise all the ships. And I think what really started this like big push for jiu-jitsu to be way more professional and more exciting was ADCC 2019. That was super fun to watch. That was like I remember sitting in my room like watching a lot of the matches. I was also had like Keenan Cornelius's Instagram live going, watching him commentate on some of the matches. That was super fun, and it's continued to grow. And then the cool thing that happened was Craig Jones really came in and said like, hey, like jiu-jitsu is getting really popular. Like, let's get the athletes paid. It seems kind of ridiculous that some of these grappling athletes only make $20,000 a year and like hardly have any money. And they only make 20 grand if they win and use that hype to like sell some instructionals and use some of that hype to do seminars and stuff like that. And so for Craig Jones to come in and be an advocate for more fighter pay, I thought that was awesome. And that, you know, we all know how that turned out. That kind of stimulated this beef between Craig Jones and ADCC, and then that led to CJI1, which CJI1 was so awesome. And so all of that hype kind of rolls in to CJI2, and then people just start duking all over it. They said, oh, the matches were boring, the format was boring, like change this, change that, and blah, 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 blah. And I think people forget, like, look, like this was free. This was a 100% free event to watch. And even though it wasn't exciting as the last one, overall it was more exciting than most of the jiu-jitsu competitions that are out there today. Like you watch some of the IBJJF competitions, no offense IBJJF, but a lot of them are snooze fests. Like I usually just watch the highlights because like seeing people get stuck in half guard, fighting for gi grips, it's just not as exciting. And so I definitely don't want to be that person that says like, you know, oh, jiu-jitsu is so boring and you guys should be thankful because CGI was more exciting. But I do think that there's like, unfortunately, this weird trend of people just dogging on CGI2 for not being as great as CGI1. And Andrew said it on the podcast on the last episode when we were recapping day one. He said, look, like Hangover 1 is an amazing movie, like one of the best comedies ever made. Hangover 2 is still a good movie. It's just not as good as Hangover 1, and that's okay. I think people forget how, you know, just because something isn't as good as the last one, that doesn't mean that you should just scrap it and get rid of it. And unfortunately, that's a really big fear that I have. My fear is that all this backlash around CGI2 is going to ruin it for the rest of the sport. That it's going to disincentivize people like Craig, people like Seth Belial to come in and do all of this dope stuff. And last year at CGI1, I was talking with Andrew and Zach, and I was like, guys, this is freaking awesome. Like, do you guys want to get season tickets? Like, you guys want to make this a tradition every single year? We go to Vegas and go to CJI, and both of them are like 100%. Like, we're bought in. And that's something that we looked forward to all year. Like, every time that three of us were hanging out, we kept saying, like, hey, CJI 2's coming up. Hey, CJI 2's coming up. We were so excited. And my fear and my concern is that the criticism and the backlash, not that to say that there's no room for criticism, but my fear is that the people that are criticizing it the most are going to disincentivize those that are really doing good in this sport. And I'm not someone that is going to say that I don't believe that jiu-jitsu will ever be as popular as MMA. I don't believe that jiu-jitsu will ever be as popular as NBA or pro baseball or anything like that. I just don't think it's going to happen. But I've seen this happen in other sports like powerlifting. Powerlifting, I think, is awesome. I'm a big fan of powerlifting. I love seeing people squat, bench, and deadlift some insane heavy-ass weight. The problem is that powerlifting is so disorganized, and it's very similar to jiu-jitsu. There's all these different federations, there's different rule sets and different things. Some people get pissed off that, these people keep winning in this federation, so then they start their own federation. And I heard someone, a friend of mine, Jesse Burdick, he put it this way. He said, the big problem with powerlifting is that the sport of powerlifting attracts a certain type of individual. And those certain types of individuals aren't usually the most organized, the most professional, or the most skilled when it comes to event organization and production. They love powerlifting. They don't necessarily have the skills to run events and to be a solid promoter. And that's why powerlifting kind of has these ups and downs, where these powerlifting meets will come in where there's a lot of hype behind him and there's a lot of, people get super excited. And then there's controversy, and then the meet organizers are just like, I'm not going through all of this again. Like, this is a thankless endeavor because, no one's ever happy enough with what we've done to try to push the sport forward. So then they just don't invest in it anymore. And so what's so cool about jiu-jitsu is that we did have some of these, professionals come in and help drive the sport forward a little bit more, like people like Mo from ADCC, people like Seth Belial. There's that guy, I can't even remember his name now. He's the super rich guy from New York who started Kasai. Even the guys that are running the AIGA competition overseas, like, there are people coming into this sport that are really pushing it forward, but if the spectators are just a bunch of people complaining, like, it's going to ruin the future of the sport, and we're going to be going back to having, ADCC in high school gymnasiums, which is going to be lame. So all that being said, like, I still think CJI 2 is a great event. As far as who I think truly won the event, I think that this is my interpretation of what happened in the finals. I think the judges, this is my best guess. I don't have any insider information. I don't know for sure. This is my best guess because I could see how some people may say, like, oh my gosh, CJI 2, it's so corrupt, and, it's a crooked event and crooked Craig and all of these things. And I just don't see that happening. I really don't believe that there is, like, this grand conspiracy against New Wave. You guys know me, I'm all about conspiracies, but this is one that I'm really not buying into. But what I think happened was when the Nicky Rod match ended and there were no submissions, I think they went to the judges' scorecards and they looked at the judges' scorecards and they said, oh, on all three judges scored this 47-47. What do we do if it's 47-47? And I believe someone said, like, if it's 47-47, then we go off of who won the last match. I think it was like a heat of the moment thing. I think, like, I could be wrong, but I think if they said, like, maybe there should have been someone that was able to say, like, hey, pause. Like, it's not just 47-47. We had no submissions. And so if there's no submissions, we got to honor the first bullet point, which is, calculate who won the most matches via judge's decision, not the total points between the two, who won the most matches via judge's decision. So I don't know. I could see how some people believe that New Wave are the true champs of CJI too, and I respect them for it. Like, I wouldn't argue that. I could also see as some people say, like, look, like the rules also say that if it's 47-47, you go off of who won the last match. And at the same time, I also understand why the athletes on either side are defending that. Like, if you got $1 million on the line, if I was in their shoes and I had $1 million, or maybe I was a coach and I was coaching someone or a team that was competing for $1 million, dude, I would do almost anything to make sure that, like, hey, like, I'm interpreting the rules and leverage of like what is going to be best for my guys. Not like breaking the rules, of course, but unfortunately, I think the rules are written in a way where it is a little confusing. And if $1 million are on the line, it makes sense that, you know, you have two opposing perspectives on that. So, but I'd love to hear from you guys. I'd love to hear what you guys think about CJI 2. I think it was a great event. If it's in Vegas next year, I'm going to do everything I can to be there. I really hope that CJI comes back. I think it's definitely a highlight of my year. Craig has talked about how he wants it to be like the Super Bowl of submission grappling, and I agree. Like, it definitely is Super Bowl-esque, and it being super exciting, it being this big spectacle. I will say this, though, if any of the staff at CJI are listening, I thought about this last CJI, and I'm not mad at the team format. Like, I love watching quintet, and I thought it was dope, so I'm not mad at the team format, but if we're not going to do the team format next year, this is an idea I had after CJI 1. CJI 1, the brackets were under 80 kilograms, over 80 kilograms, 16-man brackets on each side, both people competing for $1 million. Last time, I was thinking, okay, maybe they do that this year. And then next year, they do under 77 kilograms, or like under 70 kilograms or something like that for the men, and then they do under 66 kilograms for the women. And so we got a 16-woman bracket and a 16-man bracket. So they did a little bit of a women's bracket this year, which I think is really cool. Maybe next time they go back to individual. I think the thing that makes it tough is that when the event starts at 6 p.m., like the days are so long. Like, you're going from 6 p.m. to midnight watching grappling matches, which is fun, but it is pretty exhausting. So I don't know, if any of the officials or the brains or masterminds behind CJI 2 want to holler at your boy and hear my ideas, like, my line is always open. So I want to hear from you guys, though. If you guys watched CJI 2, let me know what you thought in the comments. If you were spectating online, what was the live stream like? Was the commentary good? Did you guys feel the energy through the screen, like how sometimes you feel the energy watching big UFC events? If you were there in person, what was your experience like? I really want to know what you guys were thinking in the moment when there was some of that confusion around who won in the finals. Leave some comments below. I'd love to interact with you guys. If you guys are looking for ways to increase your grappling athleticism so that way you can feel and perform your best, you can lift heavy and roll hard and all that good stuff, I have a 100% free training course called GRAPPLER ACCELERATOR. It gives you everything you need to get started on kickstarting your grappling athleticism so you can get brutally strong, pack on slabs of muscle, and build conditioning that never lets you gas out. If you want to check that out, you can go to thestrengthmatrix.com/grappler, or you can just check out the Strength Matrix training app in the App Store and in the Google Play Store. Lift heavy, roll hard. Catch y'all later. Peace.